All right, you guys, welcome back to Project Backbone, where we're taking 50 acres of some of the rockiest ground I've ever seen in the Texas Hill Country, and we're growing thousands of pounds of food where most people think this wouldn't even be possible. We want to show you how we're doing it every step of the way, so follow along and let's see what happens.
This is the start of our newest and biggest project yet. Situated right on the Devil's Backbone in Wimberley, Texas, not only is this project one of our most beautiful locations yet, it's also one of our most challenging. From some of the hardest and densest rock we've ever faced to extreme slopes and grades that have made access a nightmare, this project is pushing us to our limits.
So a lot of the land where it's not extremely steep looks just like this. There's these fields of stone. This is what we're starting with. There are some healthy native plants out here, but we haven't had significant rain in 2 months, so they're really starting to look stressed. And a lot of these stones are like the tip of an iceberg. So if you try to just scoop all this up and move it out of the way, you end up pulling out huge boulders, and some of them you can't even get out with heavy equipment. All right, so I just wanted to show you guys, this is why we revere and honor the native plants so much, because they can grow in these conditions, they can thrive in these conditions, even without rain for 2 months. Most of them are still looking pretty good. You can see they're growing right in between these huge boulders. The soil is very thin, it's not very fertile. But we've got evergreen sumac, we've got Texas persimmon, we've got live oaks, there's even some cedar elms in here, there's agarita. A lot of these do produce food, it's just not a lot of calories, or it takes a lot of time to process through it, so a lot of people don't eat them. But there's a lot of value to these native plant ecosystems that are already here on the land, and so as much as possible we're trying to preserve that, even as we add to the biodiversity, add to the health of the soil, and try to deal with some of the innate challenges of this particular property. So I just wanted to let you guys know that we're doing our first sponsored video here, and the company that we are being sponsored by is Roost and Root. And we've been really selective about this. We've actually turned down some other sponsorships that didn't make sense for us. We want to make sure that we work with companies that really align with what we're doing, that make sense, products that we would actually use ourselves in our own homes. We're also looking for companies that are local to Central Texas, since that's really where we work, and we believe in building up our local economy. American-made stuff if possible, and things that use materials that are as sustainable as possible, as non-toxic as possible, and really built to last. So many years ago, when I was tending my garden, I decided I needed a greenhouse. And so I hopped on the internet and I bought a greenhouse that I could afford at the time. I think it was maybe $300 or something like that. It was a metal frame and it had a flexible plastic covering. And I was so excited because season extension is so important for us, and I wanted to grow some tropical plants that are just out of our range. Put the thing up. You know, within 3 months, that plastic started to photodegrade. It just wasn't UV stabilized, and it all turned into microplastic in my beautiful organic garden, and I was super bummed. And I've talked to many, many clients about building greenhouses, and the thing is, there's this whole spectrum from a couple $100 that's just a real piece of crap, all the way up to glass and steel that's gonna cost you an arm and a leg and your firstborn child. And then I've really been looking for something that is a good middle ground, and I'm so happy to have found these kits from Roost and Root because they really fit that bill. They're built to last, and they're really, really functional at the same time. They're big enough, but they're not huge, and it's just delivering exactly what I was looking for in a greenhouse. So we're excited to be offering these to our clients and even using them in our own gardens. So gardening in Central Texas is really tricky. It keeps you on your toes because we're always getting different seasons, and a lot of times they're very, very short, the ideal growing time for something like a tomato or a broccoli or something like that. And so season extension becomes really important. Having your plants big enough to put in the ground at the very beginning of when that weather and the temperature and the moisture is right for them, so that you can actually get a good harvest. So this is where having a greenhouse and a shade house comes into play, because you need the greenhouse to start seeds early in the winter when there's still danger of frost to get your spring garden started. And then you need a shade house to start your plants in the summertime before it's cooled off, so that you can get your fall garden started as quickly as you need to. And in this case, we've bought plants from the nursery, but you know, you can imagine how much more control, how much more heirloom varieties you can use, and how much more just right on the timing that you need to be on, depending on the variable season that you're getting. You can do that much better when you have your own greenhouse. All right, the other thing about Central Texas is we're right on the edge of being subtropical, but because we still dip down into freezing temperatures and stay there for pretty long periods of time in most winters, if you want to grow tropical plants, you really do need a greenhouse, or you have to wheel them in and out of your house, which a lot of people just don't want to do. So what I love about this Roost and Root greenhouse is there's a high side over here. So what we're doing is we're doing seed starting on the low side, and then we're going to have like dwarf citrus trees and other tropical trees based on what this client particularly wants to eat on this side. And that's going to be both really beautiful and really functional at the same time. All right, so when you're building one of these kits, the first things you need to do is build yourself a flat pad. And what we do is we find the high corner and the low corner. And if you have enough soil, you can actually excavate from the high side and build up on the low side and kind of split the difference between the two. But in this case, the ground is too rocky, but the problem is the solution. We got a bunch of rocks, we built up here, and we just backfilled the whole thing with decomposed granite. We leveled it out, and we compacted it with a plate compactor. You can also do that just by hand with a tamper. And then you're ready to start building your kit on that nice flat level pad. So the first thing I want to say is that I really like the materials that are being used here. It's cedar, and they're using these solid polycarbonate panels instead of flimsy, flexible plastic, which you have to replace every so often. And I really like the window placement and the way that they've put hardware cloth on here, because the bees can get in and they can do pollination in there, but you can't, like raccoons and stuff like that aren't going to get in there and take your fruit or your veggies from you. So we decided to kind of make our own little custom anchoring system here because we're up on a ridge. And so we just got these parts at a hardware store. Roost and Root does have some offerings around anchoring kits, but we're in a really windy spot, and so we wanted to just overbuild this. And so we drove rebar into the ground, and then we connected onto it here, and then we just used this turnbuckle to tighten down. And I think this may actually be a part that we got from Roost and Root right here, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So when you order one of these kits, you can go pick it up in Dripping Springs, Texas, or you can have it shipped to you, and they ship nationwide. So in our case, we went ahead and picked it up, and it comes in panels. They're nice and neatly organized. The instructions are very good. All the hardware is organized in a nice kit. And so then you just take these panels and you put them together on your level pad, and you start to fasten them together, just following the step-by-step instructions. And we got this thing built in I think just over a day, not including the pad. So we decided to go with the XL slant roof greenhouse, which is 8 feet wide by 18.5 deep or long. And that's because we're using it to support a very large garden. They do have smaller greenhouses, and they're all the same quality. So you can size this to fit your space and your garden that it's supporting. There's a lot of great features in here that I want to show you guys. I think the first one, honestly, is just the shade cloth. A lot of times you put the shade cloth over the greenhouse, and that can make sense, but it's really nice that you can just put it up inside in this model and then take it down when you don't need it anymore as the temperatures start to cool off. So Roost and Root does have some offerings around shelving and even like beds that you can put in the greenhouse, but we decided we wanted to just kind of fully customize this ourselves so that we could build this as we go and really suit it to our exact needs. So we built these tables. Of course, you've got lots of options. You can have multiple layers. You could even put some lights in here if you wanted to grow the plants faster. So lots you can do, and we'll have a little soil mixing station over here, and we'll have pot storage. Greenhouses are usually very messy spaces, and so our goal is to have a place for everything that you're going to need in here and to keep it really neat. So a lot of times greenhouses get too hot. You need good ventilation. Also, the plants benefit from that so they don't get fungal stuff going on. So what I love about this kit is it's got solar panels on the front of it. Here's the controller. It sets the fans to start running and cool down the greenhouse automatically, so you don't have to worry about it. And then there's also this box where all the plugs are kept safe from getting wet. And we're actually going to add some other elements to this, like for the winter time, a heater that's going to be able to turn on. And I think we're going to add some extra panels and some extra power supply to do that. But yeah, it's fully automated and really slick and clean. Yeah, one more feature that we're not utilizing right now, but that I think is really smart, is that there's these holes drilled into these supports, and you can slide dowels or rods through there, and then you have a spot for hanging plants as well. So you can create multiple layers of growing space in here using those. So we're always trying to cycle energy and nutrients through the system, and chickens are a really great way to do that. So the greenhouse is going to generate plant material for the garden. The garden is then going to generate food for the chickens. The chickens are going to eat that. They're going to produce eggs and manure. That manure goes back into the garden, and the cycle continues onward. The chickens can also be used to help weed at certain times of year in the garden or in the food forest, and they're just a really important part of any food system and have been for a very long time. One of the tricky things is, having a good coop set up and making sure that they're safe from predators, because just like us, everything likes to eat chickens. So as soon as you start keeping chickens, you're gonna have foxes, possums, raccoons, hawks, all that stuff coming. So if you don't set up your coop to be resilient to that, then you're gonna lose some chickens, and we'll go into more detail about that in a future episode. So I got all these plants from 3 different vendors. I got them directly from the Arnosky family farm. They have a blue barn between Blanco and Wimberley where you can buy plants that they've grown. I got them from Wimberley Gardens and from Triple S Feed in Wimberley. So we've got Brussels sprouts, calendula, mustard greens, a bunch of different kinds of lettuce, kale, endive, strawberries. We've got some stevia, we've got some chamomile. I know we have fennel and dill, mizuna, cabbages, sages, different kinds of sage and thyme. We have some lemongrass, some mint, lemon balm, oregano, lavender, chives. These are snapdragons. I find these to be like damn near perennial here in Texas, or at least biennial. So they'll last for a couple of years, and they're great for the pollinators, and they're really pretty. I like them, Not really a permaculture plant, but hey. We've got some leeks. We've got, I already mentioned all this stuff, some rosemary back there, more cabbage and Brussels sprouts, more broccoli, more lettuce, and there's a bunch of marigolds out there. We've also got garlic, and we've got some seeds in here, because a lot of stuff you really want to grow from seeds. So we've got things like peas, we've got more arugula, we've got beets, we've got carrots, all sorts of good stuff. And of course I get the organic ones, and I got all these seeds from Wimberley Gardens. So we'll fill out those gardens out there. Whatever extra space is left after we do these starts, we'll fill in every single space with seeds, and that way, as the mulch starts to deteriorate and become soil, the whole bed is just covered with plant material.
So we had a nice paper planned out way that we wanted to organize these beds, and once we started, we realized that it makes more sense just to go lay out the beds individually and make each bed make sense on its own, instead of trying to lay it all out from the beginning.
So with these beds, we're doing an integrated pest management strategy of marigolds on the outside, a few herbs on the inside, and then our desirable leafy greens around, evenly spaced, so that each thing has an ability to reach out and grow to its fullest potential. So we're going with an integrated strategy of multiple plants spaced apart, so that if something comes in here and starts working on the tatsoi, it doesn't just have a pure bed of tatsoi that it can eat on. So we have Mexican sunflowers, marigolds, parsley, kale, and we have a diversified plant grouping here that'll make it a little bit more challenging for pests to just wipe out one whole bed if they get in here. So Sarah has assembled an incredible group of stone bordered beds from site stone from this place, because it was so rocky. And then we filled them with a garden soil that's locally available. Generally the garden soils are going to be variable in their quality. So then we top it off with our special blend that we did a previous video on. And so we top that with about 1/4 inch. And then we put this organic oat, triticale, rye straw on top of it that's all organic, grown by Lee over at Southwest Farms, a fantastic product. And we have our irrigation underneath it. So now we have this whole ecological system, deep soils that are going to be better structured with our soils amendment over time as they get watered in, and we get those roots moving all those nutrients up and down the plants. So each of these beds has its own individual valve to give the operator options for future. Maybe we put some of these in cover crop, maybe we rest them over time. Just gives us options if we only need 5 of these beds. And it's always good to pressure test your irrigation before you cover it, because you know this is just a little manufacturing defect where it's not exactly drip, it's spray irrigation, which is not exactly what we're going for. So we'll just replace this one, but all the rest just have a little drip, 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 and that's what we're going for. So it's always good to go ahead and pressure test everything before we cover it or bury it, just to make sure that we don't have little pinhole leaks somewhere that's gonna wear on your water resources.
A couple things I wanted to mention about the way that we do irrigation. It's really good to loop everything from a pressure distribution standpoint, and it's amazing how much you can cover as far as how big your zone can be. All of these beds are on one zone, and that's because it's all relatively level. There's not a really large elevation drop. There might be 10 feet of elevation drop, but if you have a lot more than that, you start to get pressure differentials that are hard to manage. And because everything loops, the water doesn't go to a dead end, and because these are relatively short runs, it all works that way. You know, there's a lot you can do with drip irrigation and hose-in timers. So if you watch a lot of our videos, you'll start to notice that we often use this 3/4 inch tubing as our main supply line that feeds into drip irrigation. We will often do that with one of these tees. So it's 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch by, it's not quite 1/2 inch, it's more like 3/8, this connection point here. And so then that converts us into Rainbird tubing, and then the rest of the parts are Rainbird brand, and we keep that consistent. These are really nice because you can take them on and off if you need to. There's actually water flowing through there, so I'm not going to, but you can untwist that and you can pull it off, unlike these insert fittings. And the 3/4 inch tubing is great because critters are not very likely to chew through this. For whatever reason, we haven't had a lot of rodents chewing through this, whereas the 1/2 inch line, that'll happen sometimes. So using this as your supply line reduces how often you have to deal with leaks because of chewing. So in 12 years of R&D on irrigation systems, this is what we've come to as our controller right here. We've installed super complex irrigation systems, and we just find that after some amount of time, they become really prone to breaking. The wires start to get nicked, and you run into all sorts of problems, and a lot of times chasing down those problems is very expensive and very difficult and very frustrating. So we just use these battery operated timers. We do have a vacuum breaker on here so that you can't have any backflow issues. This zone is big enough that we don't need a pressure regulator, so this just keeps it really simple. You can put a little filter on these if you want to, but if you're pulling directly from well water or filtered rainwater, chances are you don't need it, because there's usually already filtration over there at the pump house, but you can add extra filtration if you want to. So in this case, our irrigation water is coming from the well. So we are trying to be very efficient with how we set this up and how we use it. Of course, when you're establishing brand new plants and brand new beds and you're improving the soil, you need to use some of your water resources to do that. But as soon as we get these plants deeply rooted, which we're going to do as fast as possible, and that's also why we're covering with such a thick layer of organic hay mulch, we're going to be able to dial back this watering quite a bit. And even though these timers are really simple, they do give you plenty of options to water for. You can do like 30 minutes a day if you want to have shorter intervals more often, or you could do 2 hours every 4 or 5 days. You know, so you can do those long, deep waterings, or you can do short waterings at shorter intervals.
So one challenge that we often have using well water in the Texas Hill Country is our well water is very hard, so it has a lot of calcium deposits in it. And over time, these little emitters will start to get little calcium rings over them. And so one thing that we found very helpful is just to inject the whole line with a fulvic acid product and just let it sit overnight and then flush it the next morning. And one, it'll dissolve the calcium and push it out into the garden beds. And two, the fulvic acid is just a great nutrient amendment for the soil as well. So that's helped us prolong the life of drip irrigation and not just wait for it to calcify and then have to pull it out and replace it completely.
So all of these are our in-ground beds, and what we're going to do here, because we're not building up and putting a bunch of soil that we've imported in, we're just amending. We did put down some soil because it's just pure rock underneath here, but we want to put down about 3 inches of soil, our amendments, and then we're putting a really thick layer of hay and cover crop seed. And so for at least a season or two, we're just going to grow organic matter in the soil with these cover crop seeds, and we'll crimp them or terminate them at some point and just let that material lay here. We'll probably continue to add hay mulch until this soil has been built up to the point where you can garden in it. One thing I'm excited about is we do have some beds along the perimeter, along the deer fence, and so we are going to be able to grow some really pretty and productive vines on that fence, so it's doubling as a trellis in that case as well. But I just can't wait to see this thing green and lush and beautiful and getting carbon and organic matter down into the ground, being condensed from the sun and the air.
So these in-ground beds, we've rock milled it, we've put in a garden soil, we've topped it with our special soils blend, we've drip irrigated it, and then covered these with just a mixed diverse cover crop of Texas rye, which is a grass, forage collards, which is a brassica, and white clover, which is a clover, a nitrogen fixing species that grows well here. And the idea here is just to get these growing with a diverse cover crop so that it can just start cycling nutrients and building soil. And once this is set, then we can slowly start to shift into this broader, larger area of the garden. But it's just a slow time release. We're just gonna let the cover crops do the work for us, and then maybe next spring start planting in here. So these are our in-ground beds, and we've just cover cropped them, and we've just made a little trench in the middle of the bed and cover cropped inside the trench. So as these cover crops come up and have more access to light and in contact with the soil, once they get about 6 to 12 inches tall, we'll just nudge this mulch around them just to create more soil, better nitrogen and nutrient cycling over time. And this is a combination of organic oat, triticale, rye, and clover straw that comes from Lee at Southwest Farms, and it's just a really wonderful material that's really like a snapshot of a nutrient-dense organic pasture that's been turned into hay, that we get round bales. It's easy to cover everything with, and it's a wonderful product that has no persistent herbicides or pesticides sprayed on it at any time.
So fencing is always one of our biggest costs whenever we're trying to grow food in the hill country. A lot of times people will put up an 8-foot deer fence around their whole property, but I don't really like to do that when I can avoid it. First of all, it's expensive and it's hard. Second of all, it creates habitat fragmentation. So what we've done here is we've fenced off this 3/4 acre area for the garden and the greenhouse and for a wildflower meadow where we can grow some native herbaceous things around the septic sprinklers. But really, this is difficult to do well. I've seen a lot of deer fences that are not going to stand the test of time, and so we really wanted to make sure that this was built right. So we're using all metal, really thick, heavy gauge supports here at the points where we need bracing, and for the gate, this is a custom welded gate. It's a drive-through gate so we can get in here with equipment and trucks and trailers. And you know, I'll let Adam tell the story about what they had to do to get these things in the ground, but it was not easy, it was not cheap. But now this area is protected from deer, but they can still move through the greater property.
Yeah, so after working to drill pilot holes for our T-posts with this Bosch hammer drill and just having to work, you know, it probably took us 10 minutes to get a single hole with this thing. We finally just leaned on our fence builders, which were fantastic, and they had a nice big diesel generator, pneumatic rotary jackhammer, and they were able to just knock out the hardest areas of this fence in just half a day. And then we just went behind them and put our T-posts in. So it was a real team effort to get these fences up.
All right, so that's the end of episode 2, but we've got a lot more to do out here. We're not out of the woods yet, although we have tackled a lot of really difficult challenges already and overcome them. So now things are really starting to come together for phase 1 as we plant the garden, as the cover crop seeds come in. We're gonna be able to show you guys some amazing results. Next up, we're gonna start planting the food forest, and so that's gonna be just a diversity bomb. And then after that, we've gotta build the road down the really steep hill that we showed you guys in episode 1. And so that's gonna be about how do we create access in a way that is respectful of what's happening here just through the natural ecosystem, but be able to get down there and do work. And then we're gonna be doing massive amounts of berms and swales, brush berms, beaver dam analogs, and of course biodiversity plantings as well. And then kind of the cherry on the cake is gonna be the grotto swimming pool, which we're excited to show you guys as well.
This video is made possible by our patrons. Their support allows us to continue to share our educational resources, knowledge, and make these videos for you to enjoy. To get access to additional content from our projects, Q&A priority, and more, click the link below.
All right, hey, thanks guys. Appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to learn more about what we do, how we do it, why we do it, you can hop over to our website. There's tons of good articles. You can join our newsletter. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. We'd love to see you there and answer your questions. Thanks again. Enjoy.